Good morning. This is Carol Dover, President and CEO of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, and I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedule to be here today. Our hearts, prayers, and thoughts are with you. I want you to know that this trade association is working diligently and around the clock to do everything we possibly can to help our industry, our members, our non-members, to be able to keep their head above water, and we're very, very not only concerned but interested to hear from you at a later time, how you're doing. Don't hesitate to text us or email us to keep us all abreast of what's going on in your area. Secretary Ken Lawson was to be with us this morning, but he got a call from the governor himself, and so he has to be with the governor this morning. So I'm going to introduce our speaker in just a minute, but I want to take a point to say thank you very much to Governor Ron DeSantis and the leadership, the mayors from around the states I've talked to, the congressmen, the congresswomen. Senator Scott and Senator Marco Rubio have been very diligent in talking to us on a regular basis, and I really can't thank all of them enough for their concerns and reaching out. So though you may not be hearing from all of them individually, I can reassure you that they have been in touch with this trade association. Today we're going to talk about the Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program that's currently available to businesses located in Florida. Some of you might remember this loan availability during Hurricane Michael. I want you to forget everything you ever knew about it during those days, because a lot of those bureaucratic restrictions we're working on changing to make this loan more readily available to each of you. I'm going to turn it over to our speaker now, Mr. Mike Meyer. Mike, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. Mike is the CEO of the Florida Small Business Development Center, and he is going to walk us through how you apply for this loan. So thank you, Mike. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Carol. And there we go. I want to thank everybody. First and foremost, I often say that, after God, my father, and our veterans, that small businesses really are my heroes. The things in which you do each and every day and the contributions in which you make to our state's economy, to our national economy, but especially to our local communities, is really makes a real difference. Our small businesses in the state contribute nearly half of our overall trillion-dollar economy that we have in Florida. So what you do makes a difference, and I appreciate that. And I'll express a shared sentiment expressed by Carol. We recognize that COVID-19 and the policies that are being enacted and to protect the wealth or the health and the well-being of our citizens are creating very significant impacts, especially to our state's biggest economic contributor, and that's our small businesses. So I'll cover the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan, but I'll also discuss the SBA's recent enactment of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Together, the state and this federal emergency capital can provide that necessary capital need that our small businesses need to get through this extremely trying time. Do I have capabilities to drive?
Yes, you should have the capability now.
There we go. Thank you. Emergency response, especially for small businesses, really is a team effort between our state partners at the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity and our federal partners at the U.S. Small Business Administration. The Florida SBDC network is actually the state small business development agency. We're the principal provider for small business assistance in the state of Florida. But together on a pretty large team for protecting business, industry, and in stabilizing the economy as part of the ESF 18 function for the State Emergency Response Team, we work with many organizations, including the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. Together, it's the partners in this particular team that assure that we're able to provide the information and resources that our businesses, all businesses in the state of Florida, need in order to respond and recover from a disaster event. As I said, the Florida SBDC is really designated as the first responders for small business, making sure that the state and the federal resources that are available to small businesses are well organized and working in collaboration with one another. So that is our principal responsibility as a member of the state's emergency response team, is to really lead in that coordination and the administration of those federal and state business recovery programs. Now, it's important to say, as I said, that there is a distinction between the state's Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program and the U.S. Small Business Administration's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Really, the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program was created by the Florida legislature and the Governor Jeb Bush at the time in 1992, recognizing that federal assistance lagged, and that our small businesses, for each day that passed during a disaster event, the likelihood of them ever reopening their doors was ever declining. So it was important that they developed a particular tool, and this is a unique tool to the state of Florida. Other states are trying to model what it is that we're doing here in Florida with this particular program, to provide emergency short-term capital to our small businesses as they wait and apply for federal assistance and or the recovery of insurance proceeds or other long-term solutions, capital solutions. This is how quickly COVID-19 has really moved. March 9th, Governor DeSantis declared a state of emergency, and then he opened up the state's business damage assessment on March 13th. The business damage assessment really collects the necessary research and data that the state and the governor need in order to apply for federal assistance. So it was a very critical exercise, but we've seen an immediate response to our request for business damage assessments from our small businesses throughout all of Florida. And very quickly, we were able to collect all of the necessary information that we needed to immediately apply for the activation of federal assistance from the U.S. Small Business Administration. So a couple of days later, the governor acted the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program, and 2 days later, or just yesterday, the U.S. Small Business Administration acted on the governor's application and activated the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Now, what is the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan? It really is a short-term loan, a short-term solution. It is not a grant, and we got to remember that. These are loans that are backed by the Florida taxpayers. But it is an interest-free, and I like to make sure that we say fee-free as well, loan to really bridge that short-term capital need, to provide the necessary working capital, cash flow, capital to replace equipment or inventory that our small businesses need to reopen quickly. It is administered by the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity with the assistance of the Florida SBDC network. We act as the face for small businesses in that process, but it's also backed by Florida First Capital, which is the state's, or actually the nation's largest CDC lender, an SBA program lender. They act as the fiscal agent for the program and underwrite all of the loans. Now, the governor made an initial appropriation of $50 million to this program. That's the largest initial appropriation to any time that this program has been enacted over its 25-year plus history. We expect that we're going to utilize the full amount, but the governor and governors in the past have always added more resources to the pool, recognizing the need for small businesses. So if we do feel like we're approaching that $50 million mark, we'll certainly make that request to the governor and hopefully add more to the pool if it's necessary. Now, the applicant for the loan is actually the individual or individuals who own at least a majority of the business. So you might have a partnership that's 50-50. Well, then both partners need to be on the application for the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan. The amount of the loan, the maximum that you can borrow is up to $50,000. Now, there are certain circumstances, and this tends to be on the larger small business side, where we can go up to $100,000. The term of the loan is for 1 year, and it's 360 days, 365 days, not from the day in which the program was enacted, but in which the small business executes its promissory note for the program. So it's 1 year, and it's interest-free, as I said, for that 1 year. And there are no origination fees or other application fees for this. Now, it's also an unsecured loan backed by the applicants themselves or the business. There is a limitation, only one loan per business. I often get the question, well, what if I have multiple locations for my business? Regrettably, it's only one loan per business. Now, many entrepreneurs out there might have multiple businesses. And in that particular case, you're able to make an application for each of those businesses. Now, the justification necessary or the threshold is that you got to be able to demonstrate individual business tax returns for each of those individual businesses. And the use of the proceeds are intended to really provide that working capital and used for the purposes of maintaining operations and sustaining operations or restarting business operations. So there's a lot of flexibility in the utilization of these funds, but they are not intended to really pay past debts. So that's important to remember. They're really just about providing that operating capital that you need to get through this particular event. And then the sources of repayment, during the closing process, we do ask, or part of the closing documents, is a certification about how you will, as a borrower of the program, repay it. Its title is a Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan. It's intended to bridge towards some other long-term solution. So during that particular process or closing process of the loan, you will indicate, I'm applying for federal assistance, or I'm expecting, business interruption insurance to kick in, and utilize that or assign that to the repayment of this particular loan. Businesses may also use business proceeds or restored cash flow in order to pay the loan as well. So there's nothing that says they must use long-term disaster assistance that they apply for or receive for this. They can certainly use other proceeds to repay the loan. I want to make sure that I also address what happens in the event of a default. And I'm missing that slide in this particular case. You have 1 year to pay the loan back. You will receive notification. You do not need to make payments during the year. It is intended to be a balloon, but certainly many of businesses have paid payments or installments during the year just to manage cash flow accordingly. But if at that 1 year mark you're unable to pay the loan, it technically does go in default, and there are state statutory requirements about what happens with defaults to the state. It will be sent to a collection agency, and that collection agency will charge a 13 to 15% premium on top of the total principal of the loan once it's assigned to the collection agency. And the collection agency then will try to collect on the loan and their fee or their added fee. It's also important to understand that when it goes into default, the collection agency can also report it to credit reporting companies. So we certainly don't want to get that far. And one thing that we do, given the relationship that we have with the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, is to stay in communication about who is repaying their loans and who is not, so we can reach out to them and provide SBDC assistance to help the individuals that may not be able to repay the loan on that 1 year date and find another solution for them. So we're going to continuously work with our businesses in hopes that we never put anybody into a default situation. Now, who is eligible? Businesses have to meet principally 4 primary requirements in order to be eligible for this particular program. Obviously, they need to be established and actively operating prior to the actual disaster event, and they must have a physical location in the state of Florida. I sometimes get questions by businesses that do business in the state of Florida but do not have a physical presence here. In those particular cases, they do not qualify. You must have a physical location in the state of Florida. And the details about that are there. Businesses also must be for-profit, privately held small businesses. And because it is a business-saving, job-saving program, the businesses must have at least 2, but no more than 100 employees. Now, for this particular activation, the state has recognized that many of our businesses, especially in the industries that are most important to us, such as our tourism industry, utilize 1099 employees or independent contractors pretty extensively, and therefore are allowing 1099 employees to be part of that count towards meeting that minimum requirement. So that's an important distinction that hasn't existed in previous activations. And obviously, you can't have an outstanding debt to the state. If you have an existing emergency bridge loan program or a loan that's in default, you can't receive another bridge loan. And of course, the business must demonstrate the fact that they've been impacted by COVID-19. Now, how the SBDC helps. We are not the lender. The lender is the state of Florida, the Department of Economic Opportunity as the administrator, and Florida First Capital as the underwriter. But as I said, we are the face for this particular program, meaning that we provide one-on-one assistance from the beginning to the end of the process. So the SBDC is there to answer questions and expectations, eligibility about the program. We're there to also pre-screen for that eligibility, making sure that you don't jump through unnecessary bureaucratic hoops in order to apply for something in which you're not eligible for from the start. We're also there to provide individual one-on-one assistance to help people complete their applications. We know that government applications are never easy and therefore can be rather technical. We're there to be able to answer and assist on that one-on-one basis to help individuals or businesses complete the application process. We also organize and facilitate bridge loan committees. Now, these bridge loan committees are generally consist of bankers and bankers that do and are familiar with microloans and small business loans. That is an independent body that reviews our loan applications for the bridge loan. And the SBDC does not participate in that particular process. Actually, we're statutorily prohibited from actually being involved in a loan decision, in the loan decision-making process. But we facilitate those loan committees, meaning that we deliver the loan package to them, we summarize it, and we give them all of the documentation necessary in order to make a decision with respect to the application. And then we act as the primary point of contact, so we don't shuffle you around. You will be assigned as an applicant, an SBDC disaster loan specialist, and that specialist will be the one that you'll work with through the entire process. So there's no call this number or email this person through the various steps of the program. And then if approved, the SBDC will also facilitate the closing process. We'll work with the underwriters or the fiscal agent to get the closing documents, and we'll work with you to execute the closing documents to ultimately then handle the distribution of the loan proceeds. And then we're also there and do what we do every other day of the year, and that's to provide the long-term, ongoing, no-cost professional business consulting to our small and medium-sized businesses, especially through a recovery process. So what's the process look like? Well, for the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan, there is an there is an application. It's not quite online yet, but I know DEO is working towards establishing an online application as we speak. And I would expect it may be activated as soon as today, moving forward, and that would make the process a little bit easier. But right now, there's an application form on floridadisasterloan.org. A business would download that application. It is a fillable PDF form. They can fill it out, but then they need to print it, sign it, scan it, and save it as a PDF. But there's other documentation and that's necessary to support the application as well. So you need to gather those required documents. You need to print, scan, and save them as PDFs as well. And these include, you need to have the previous 2 years of the business tax statements. If you're a new business that just opened up within the last 2 years and but you were established prior to the declaration of the event, and you were actively operating, but you don't have your business taxes, you don't have any business tax statements, then you just simply need to provide an explanation that you don't have business tax statements because you opened up on such and such date. You do need to provide some level of justification with respect to meeting the minimum employer number or employee number as an employer. And these would be forms such as the IRS Form 941 or W-3s or maybe some W-2s of the employees that you do have, or 1099s for the independent contractors that you compensate as well. But you'll also need the personal income tax returns for each applicant named in the application. Again, you got to have at least 51% of the business owners in the application. So if you have multiple owners, to get to that 51%, each of the business owners need to provide their personal tax statements for the previous 2 years, and that includes their 1040 and all of the appropriate schedules and worksheets. So that's all of the documents that are necessary in order to make application. Now, what do you do with that application and those support documents? The preferred and most direct and quickest way is to actually email that information to your local SBDC office. And you can find the local SBDC offices in the email address for those 9 regional offices that we have at floridasbdc.org/locations. Again, that's floridasbdc.org/locations. We have up there the telephone numbers if you have any questions that you want to ask about the application process, listed there, along with a primary email address in which you can send these your applications and support documentations. An alternative is to mail the application to our SBDC headquarters office here in Pensacola, and the mailing address is there on the screen. You can also email it to our centralized disaster email address, which is disaster@floridasbdc.org. You can also submit questions there as well. But if you do submit your application either by mail or by email to the headquarters of the SBDC, all we're going to do is we're going to route it back to the local SBDC. So the preferred method, again, is to send it directly to your local SBDC office. And what will happen is, as I said earlier, an SBDC loan disaster specialist will be assigned to you, and that individual will reach out to you. I'm asking everybody to please be patient with us. The demand for this particular program is unprecedented. It exceeds all of the hurricanes that we've had over the last 5 years and other declarations that were made for this particular program combined. So we're doing our very best to be responsive to the inquiries and to the applications that we received thus far, but it is going to take us a little bit more time than we expected. Now, as I said, yesterday, the U.S. Small Business Administration acted on Governor DeSantis' application for federal assistance for small businesses by activating their economic injury disaster loan program. SBA plays a very critical role in disaster response after major disaster events. They partner with FEMA when they come into our state after a hurricane and provide disaster loans to individuals, businesses, nonprofits, and the like. However, during this particular event, they are offering only one of the 2 primary disaster loan programs, and that's the economic injury disaster loan. Obviously, businesses aren't per se suffering physical damage like we would experience in a natural disaster event, but the economic injury disaster loan program is available. These are direct loans from the federal government made by SBA. Disaster loans are the only time that SBA actually makes direct loans to businesses, and applicants need to justify in their application that they suffered substantial economic injury. Now, that's really upon the applicant to demonstrate that, and there are certain nuances and challenges with doing that. Therefore, I always recommend that you don't try to complete the application and submit the application on your own, but rather work with your local SBDC office to make sure that you've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. But applicants must also have, they can't have credit available elsewhere, and there is no clear definition or criteria about what that actually means. It's a determination that's made by SBA when they look at an application. But generally, if somebody has a large line of credit already existing and they could utilize that, that would be credit available elsewhere. So again, the agency is the one that makes that determination. It's a very difficult thing to define. Obviously, you need to have a good credit history that's acceptable to SBA. That doesn't mean that you need to have a 750 credit score. You can have low credit scores, but you need to be able to at least demonstrate the ability to repay the debt service. And then in some cases, you also need to provide collateral if the loan is large enough. Now, you can borrow up to $2 million. So the higher the loan, the more collateral you're likely you have to put forward. But collateral isn't always required. So again, there you can talk to your SBDC or SBA disaster loan specialist. The interest rate for COVID-19 for this particular federal program is 3.75%, and the loan terms do go up to 30 years. Now, the term of the loan and the amount of the loan really are dependent upon the borrower's real need, so inability to repay. If you have questions and or want to start the application process, SBA does have this online. It's an online application. You can go to disasterloan.sba.gov. And then I've also listed there SBA's Customer Service Center hotline or toll-free line, along with their disaster customer service email address. Now, you can also complete the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program application in hard copy and submit that via mail, but I don't recommend that. I have heard nothing but horror stories about people trying to actually submit their application via hard copy. And it's very difficult to trace about where it actually went once it gets to the processing center for SBA. So I would encourage you to maybe use the hard copy application forms to put everything down on paper that then can be easily transposed into the online application. A few facts that I like to make people aware about the SBA loans. Major reasons that these loans are declined generally are technicalities. The applicant didn't dot all the I's or cross all the T's with respect to the application and or the support documentation necessary. Or they demonstrate an inability to really repay the debt service by the statements and other information that they provide as part of the application, or they have unsatisfactory credit history in credit score in order to make the loan. Now, I always recommend that a decline doesn't mean that you will never be able to receive that loan. A decline simply is the SBA's way of saying that something is not right here and it needs some kind of response. So I always encourage that people that receive an initial decline always appeal that decline. But there might be something that you need to do in that application in order to correct it and make it stronger. So I always recommend go to your local SBDC if you've received a decline. Now, as it relates to applying for this loan or the bridge loan, the state's bridge loan, I highly encourage that nobody wait. Even if you don't understand or know the full extent yet of the economic injury in which your business has suffered, now is the time to get the application in and started. And with the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, if you apply for a particular amount, it doesn't mean that you need to necessarily take the full amount in which you were approved. If you find that you don't need the full amount, or at a later date, you have within 2 years to actually, I don't want to say reapply, but basically make modifications to your existing loan and request additional funds as well. So get the process started. The earlier the better. There's going to be very significant national demand on SBA with respect to the activation of this program. So the earlier that you can get into the process, the more likelihood that you're going to hear a response quicker. SBA does have a 3-step process, but as I've already indicated, please seek the assistance of your local SBDC office before you submit the economic injury disaster loan application. It can be invaluable to you with respect to making sure that you've done everything that's necessary to make it as strong of an application as possible and avoid a decline. The other thing that we do during times of disaster, which is a little bit different this go around, is the state, tells the SBDC coordinate with our federal agency partners at the SBA to establish business recovery centers. But given the nature of COVID-19, neither SBA or the SBDC are establishing physical business recovery centers the way that we would. If we had a physical business recovery center, this is the place where small businesses only can go to receive one-on-one assistance from SBA and SBDC disaster specialists. But regrettably, we're not going to do that here with this particular event. So both SBA and the SBDC are operating quote-unquote virtual business recovery centers. That is, we're servicing our businesses through email, through teleconferencing, Zoom, WebEx, etc., to be able to provide the assistance that our small businesses need. This is a snapshot of the information that's on our SBDC.org locations website of all of our 9 regional offices. We technically have 45 offices across the state, but we are centralizing just through our regional offices at this particular time. So please reach out to your local SBDC. At that point, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike, so much for that. Let's see, I can look at some of the questions. Mike, can you give me back the controls of the screen?
Can you tell me how? I don't use
the virtual office.
I use Zoom.
Thank you.
There we go.
Let's see.
We also want to make sure that everybody understands these slides will be available to anybody on the call, and we'll send them out after the call today.
Yes. So these are some of the questions today. We're just looking over some of the questions now.
I think we answered a few of the questions already. Will we have access to the slideshow after the webinar? The answer is yes to that. Are 501c3 eligible for this loan program?
Nonprofits are not eligible for the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program, but most nonprofits are eligible for the SBA's, the Federal Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program.
Perfect. Mike, I have actually a question.
The interest rate. So the interest rate for nonprofits for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the federal loan program, is actually less than what it is for private businesses, private sector businesses.
Gotcha. Perfect. With the Florida program, obviously disasters in the past has been tied to hurricanes and natural occurrences that are very short-lived. You know, with rumor or comments that this pandemic may last 12 to 18 months, has there been any talk or consideration about expanding the 1 year to a larger time frame?
In some major events, such as Hurricane Michael and Hurricane Irma of recent times, we have granted, or I should say the state has granted, loan forbearances to individuals that were in maybe a SBA loan process, but had not yet heard a decline or an approval of their loan. So there's been some exceptions made, but there has not been any conversation about just simply extending the terms, say, from 12 months to 24 months at this particular point.
Let's check to make sure people can.
Perfect.
Real quick. Mike, just stop just a second. I want to make sure everyone's still hearing us on the call.
Jeff Lukeman, can you text me if you can hear us?
Or Lois? It's no good. Something's going on wrong. I know my computer just went blank.
Oh.
And here's the line.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know what's happening then. All right. Go ahead and Q&A. We're about to wrap this up.
So, question, Mike: if a company had over 100 employees prior to the coronavirus and now are under 100, would they be eligible for the loan package?
They would be eligible. They just simply have to explain that they've had a decline in employment with respect to the fact that they were impacted by the COVID-19 virus.
Next question is, if a business has just shut down, how do they prove damages that will happen in the future, but they haven't occurred yet?
Some historical financials, generally no more than 2 or 3 years of historical financials, and then projections moving forward about what the business might look like as a result of the impact. That's where the art really is in the federal loan application process, especially for seasonal businesses, because if you don't account for that seasonality, in that application, it can significantly impact you, especially if you're a business that's dependent upon spring break, like a lot of Florida businesses are, in which right now.
Okay. Is there a minimum credit score required in order to apply for a loan?
There is no minimum. The top criteria, certainly credit history and credit scores, are a factor in making loan decisions, but it's not the top criteria. Really what we're looking for is, does the business, by taking on this additional debt service, have the ability to recover and repay the debt? That's what's most important both to the state and to the federal government.
Okay.
Hey, Bob, Jeff Lubkeman. I have a question from a member. Question is, what is the average turnaround time once a completed application is provided, and about how long does it take to complete the application and approval process?
Okay, so from the submission of a completed application for the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program, historically, we got so good at doing it, we could do it in about 3 to 5 days. That's if the application was completed. More often than not, we receive incomplete applications. That is, somebody sent in the application form, but missed something on the form, or they did not provide all of the required support documentation. So we sometimes have to go back and forth. But once the receipt of the application and its completeness, we generally, historically, have been able to do 3 to 5 days. But I'm going to tell you right now that that's probably a multiple of 3 at this particular point, given to the demand in which we have for this program right now. My team is working on 3,000 emails that we've received just over the last 48 hours. And every time they answer one, 3 more come in. So we're working as quickly as we can to those that have submitted us the applications and getting them into the review review process. So just be patient with us. With respect to the federal loan program, it's really hard to say. I'm going to speak honestly and candidly. SBA is a bureaucratic agency, and there's a lot of bureaucracies and oneruses with the application process. Ideally, they would like to get it done within 21 days of a submitted application. But I've heard more stories than not of it taking months in order to get the federal assistance. That's why the bridge loan is so critical in providing that short-term capital need as you apply for that long-term assistance.
We've recorded this.
Okay, we're nearing the end of our time allotment, so wanted to let every participant know that we have recorded this session. Also, Mike, is there someone that had an answer that was not answered today? Who should they contact for any further questions or clarification?
Our main office here at headquarters is taking calls and taking all of the emails for any general inquiries. So they can call us at 850-898-3479 or email us at disaster@floridasbdc.org.
Okay. The last question I have is, if a business owner has multiple LLCs, would they be, so like in a hotel, for instance, each hotel would be a separate LLC. Would that organization be able to file under either loan package for each separate LLC?
So long as they file separate tax returns for each of the LLCs, business tax returns, then yes, they would be eligible to be able to apply for a Florida bridge loan for each of those businesses. As relates to the federal government, more often than not, they say that you cannot borrow more than $2 million total for the business. I've heard and seen them actually consolidate businesses, and not account for them to being separate enterprises when the ownership is the same from business to business. That's just something to keep in mind.
Sure.
Great. Mike, I want to thank you for taking your time today. I hope that this was helpful to our members, and remember that we have it recorded. You can also go to our website. Please feel free to contact any of the staff here if you have questions. And with that, we will hold on.
Carol, this is Dan Murphy. I want to also let you know we have other webinars available this week. We have several. We have one tomorrow with the National Restaurant Association as well. We will forward those out with everybody. We've got 2 of them. We have one on Friday, just general webinars on these type of topics. So stay tuned. And we'll forward those as well to you.
Great. All right. Thank you all very much, and we'll be here if you need us.
Thank you.
Mike.